He did try to break me, and the only solace I have in all of this is that he did not succeed. He did not succeed. So yeah, there we were. He had taken my kids. I was freaking traumatized. And then he was taking them, and I was traumatized by that. He had my daughter once for like 3 days, and she came back so sick, y'all, like so incredibly sick. She like had lost weight. She was really sick. She couldn't breathe. I mean, my kids are asthmatics, and he had them around smoke. And I would say, hey, you know, they can't be around smoke. And he would say, you're such a freaking liar. That's not smoke. That's from the chimney. But like, I know the difference between like tobacco and anyway, it was awful. And all this time I'm thinking that it's with a church friend, but really it's with his like boyfriend. And it was rough. Okay. And so here we are, and we're trying to just get through. And then he says something amazing right around Christmas time. Well, right around December. So like the middle of December, he says he found a girlfriend. Well, hell, I am so excited, not for her, but because I think that means he's going to get away from me. And like, he starts telling the kids that he found them a new mommy. And my kids would come home and say, Mom, Dad found us a new mommy now, and we get to call her mommy. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, you probably shouldn't call anyone else mommy. And, you know, sometimes Dad can tell you things that may not be super true, so just be really careful. And I was like, have you met your new mom? And they're like, no, we haven't met her yet. But we talked to her on the phone a lot. And I'm like, what is happening? So then he says, I met this woman. She's a famous author, and I'm not going to tell you who she is. And I was like, does she live in Canada? Like, what are you talking about? So he met this super cool woman who he's in love with and blah, blah, blah. At the same time, guys, I'm going through a thing where they actually found a cancerous tumor on my back for medical care that he never allowed me to get while I was with him. They found a tumor that I had had for a really long time, and he never let me go get checked out, and he would laugh and say it's probably cancer. Well, it was cancer. So at the same time, I was having cancer removed out of my back, and it's a very rare, only 1 in a million people get this type of cancer. It's called DNSFP, and it grows roots. So it's a tumor that whoosh, shoots out roots. So at the same time that he found his new girlfriend, who's a famous author, I'm going through cancer, and I'm trying to figure out what happens if my kids lose me. This cannot be happening. It was wild. So Christmas time comes, and Christmas time, guys, it was magical and awful at the same time. So he said that he was going to have the kids in the afternoon on Christmas, and I could have them in the morning. And I didn't know how I was going to make Christmas happen. I had no idea. But, of course, my church, as always, came through. And they made sure that my kids had everything on their list. And then some amazing people from back at home, back in Las Vegas, that I used to work with advocating for foster care kids, they actually sent my kids a bunch of gifts, which was like the sweetest thing ever. And it was like you always gave to us, and we're happy to give to you. And it was just so sweet. My kids, y'all, woke up on Christmas morning in their little 1-bedroom apartment when they had like hardly any toys, right? And they walked out, and the entire living room was filled. They went to bed, there was nothing. They woke up the next day, and the entire living room was filled with presents. Filled. And they ripped them all apart, and they swam in the wrapping paper, and they had so much fun. And it was everything, and they were so happy. And that was a really good time. And then it was time for him to have them. And I was like very hesitant. And he had texted me pictures like, they're going to have the best Christmas with me. You're not going to be able to give them anything. And I have all these gifts for them. And there was a ton of gifts. And I'm like, I don't know. Those gifts seem like really weird. But my kids went to his house, and they came back that evening. When they went to his house and they came back with nothing, of course. And they said, we opened gifts, but none of it was our size. And it was all for just girls. And then Dad said we had to leave it there. And I was like, okay, well, that's fine. You have so many toys here. They're like, yeah, we have so many toys here. Well, then he says, I'm leaving now. Like on Christmas night, he says he's leaving to go see his new girlfriend, whatever, famous author in Utah. She lives in Utah. And I was like, okay, like, are you coming back? And he's like, yeah, I'll be back in 2 weeks. And so I was like, well, at least I have a 2-week break. And he was not back in 2 weeks. This man left and went to Utah to see his famous author girlfriend situation. And mind you, him and I are still legally married, because in the state of North Carolina, you cannot get divorced until you've been living apart for a year. So we'd only been apart since July, and it was December. And I wasn't even a resident of North Carolina yet. And we were still legally married. So he goes to meet his new girlfriend in Utah or whatever. Well, all of the gifts, I will find out later, end up being gifts that he bought for his, or he got from charity in like the new girlfriend's kids sizes, she had all girls, and took all those gifts and wrapped them again and took them to Utah to give to the girls. So when he pulled up, he opened up his trunk and there was a bunch of gifts for the girls there. So the gifts that he had given to my kids on Christmas, he actually rewrapped because they were never meant for them. They were meant for his new girlfriend's kids or whatever. And so he gets to Utah and he calls the kids and he tells them that he's with their new mommy now, how amazing she is, and how she's going to make sure that they're always taken care of. And I'm like, how long do we have to like entertain these phone calls? So I asked, the attorney the church was working with, like, how long do we have to, they're like, listen, if it's just phone calls, like, typically the court will allow that, like, just, you have to let him have the calls. And I'm like, great. So here I'm talking to them on the phone, like, your new mommy this, your new mommy that, and he's calling her, I don't remember what he called her. I want to say, like, Angela or something, he said was her name. And she was a famous author, and she had this really cool house in Utah, and they were doing so great, and she had 4 daughters, and, like, there was going to be room for them, and they were going to move to Utah with them and be a family. And my kids were like, Mom, do we have to go to Utah? Do we have to move there and leave you? And I was like, no, you don't have to move me. You don't have to leave. It's totally fine. Dad is just going through some things right now. It's going to be fine. He was like, he's, happy, and that's okay. And I was like, but you guys don't have to go find a new mom. That's not how this works. And so I remember I had gotten paid and I was so excited because I had made a little bit extra and I could take my kids out to dinner. So I actually took them out, I will never forget this, to Mexican food at this little Mexican restaurant, and we're sitting there and we're eating. My kids are so excited because we never got to go out to eat, and we're eating chips and salsa and we're so excited, and I get a text message from my bishop that says, I need you to call me right now. And I immediately start to panic. So I was like, hey guys, Mom's going to go to the bathroom. I'll be right here. So I remember like walking so I could still see them in this restaurant. And I called him and I was like, hey, what's up? And he was like, okay, you're still legally married, correct? I was like, yeah. He's like, still legally married? I was like, yes. And he's like, well, Carl just reappeared. Carl just reappeared at a church in Utah and he's married. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? She's like, yep, marriage certificate and all. He's married. I was like, no, he has like a girlfriend. He's like, oh, that's not his girlfriend, that's his wife. And I was like, they got married? He's like, they got married. They got married as soon as he got down there. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he's like, she has 4 daughters, Andrea. And I was like, yeah, but like, I didn't think they were living. He's like, they're living together, they're married, he has 4 daughters, and his son's there. And when he said all of those things, my heart dropped, and I said, you have to get the girls out of there. You have to get those girls out of there. You have to get those babies out of there. And he's like, we're trying, like, her bishop is trying to talk to her. He's going by a different name. Of course, because he's an idiot. Instead of going by Carl Dean, he was going by Dean Carl. So, super smart with that, Carl. But he went by the name Dean, and he showed up in a new church, and of course, they're like, oh, we can transfer your records. And he's trying to lie, but also trying to tell some of the truth. They end up connecting his records. There's an alert on his records because the church had alerted after all this stuff happened. There's an alert on his records. The records alert that you need to call. I don't remember who they had him call, but they called this person. They said, where is he? And they said, oh, he just showed up here and he's married to so-and-so. And that's when they were like, oh my gosh, this is really bad. So I was like, well, have they told her? And they're like, her bishop has pulled her aside and told her that this man is married. She's not listening. She's convinced we're all crazy. She's convinced we're liars. And I was like, well, is she going to get her girls out? He's like, no. And I was like, well, then you have to do something. I was like, talk to somebody, do something, talk to somebody. And they were like, okay, what if you talked to her ex-husband? And they're like, if he can call you, that's the kid's dad. He's very concerned. We alerted him what's happening, but he wants to talk to you. He wants to figure out what the hell is going on here because he's worried that this doesn't make any sense. And I was like, well, of course. So like, can we give him your phone number? And I was like, oh my gosh, I do not want to get pulled into one more thing. First of all, I'm dealing with this. Second of all, I have fucking cancer. Third of all, like, this is a whole nother thing. Like, what are you even talking about? But because those girls were in danger, I said, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And I was like, it doesn't make any sense. And they're like, no, what doesn't make any sense is that he's telling this wife that you are a drug addicted prostitute and he needs to save his children from you. So she's planning a life with her kids and your kids all together. And I was like, what? And they told me her name. I found her fucking Facebook profile and she had put on there, Mom of 7. Mom of 7, because she said that my kids were her kids. She'd literally never met them, and yet Mom of 7. So I was just waiting to talk to her ex-husband.